Newborg is the founding father of neurotheology, a new branch of neuroscience that studies the effects of spirituality on the human brain. It's a scientific quest he has pursued as long as he can remember.
Ever since I was a kid, I was very interested in trying to understand reality. I was disturbed by the fact that everyone was looking at the same reality, and yet there were people of different religions and different political beliefs.
And found the way to peer inside the brains of believers while they were in the midst of a religious ritual. It's the highest of high-tech brain imaging devices, the SPECT scanner.
I'm going to come in and I'm going to just inject you through the IV with the goal that I'm going to try very hard not to disturb you or distract you or make any noise. And you're just going to continue to do your prayer session until it's done.
This woman is a Presbyterian minister. She's prayed to God daily for over 34 years. Right now, she's deep in prayer. At the height of her connection with God, Andy injects her with a harmless radioactive dye. Over the course of the next few minutes, as she continues to pray, the dye migrates to the parts of her brain where the blood flow is the strongest.
The brain works in a very nice way that the more active a particular part is, the more blood flow it gets, and the less active it is, the less blood flow it gets.
These are the images of her brain before and during her prayer. The redder the shade, the more active the neural area is.
This is the resting scan. This is the prayer scan, showing increased activity in the frontal lobes and in the language area of the brain.
And has scanned hundreds of brains in the midst of their prayer rituals, from Muslim imams to Tibetan monks to meditating atheists.
So, for example, when a person feels deeply focused on their prayer, we see increased activity in the focusing area of the brain.
This area of the brain, the frontal lobe, is intensely active when we hold conversation. Andy believes that in Judeo-Christian prayer, the frontal lobe activates just as it would in normal conversation. To the brain, talking to God is indistinguishable from talking to a person.
When we study Buddhist meditation where they're visualizing something, we might expect to see a change or an increase of activity in the visual areas of the brain.
In Buddhist practice, the divine is an abstract presence. Not a person who is directly spoken to, but rather an essence that can be visualized during deep meditation. And when Andy looks at the brains of people who do not believe in God, he finds that simple, quiet meditation produces none of the brain activity of believers.
This was a scan of an atheist. We actually had them meditating or contemplating God, showing that the frontal lobes don't activate as opposed to the person praying who does.
To an atheist, God is unimaginable. But to the believer, experiences of God are more than thoughts. They are lived sensations and just as real as the physical world that we all sense.
So it helps us to understand that at least when they're describing this to us, that they are really having this kind of an experience. What I'd like to say is that the experience is at least neurologically real.
And his brain studies show that all religions create neurological experiences that are just as real as if God physically existed in the world outside our brains. And if God only exists inside our brains, that does not mean God is not real. Our brains are where reality crystallizes for us.
Is certainly this notion that there is something bigger than all of us here, and whether it's the whole universe or whether there is something beyond all of that, I'm still working on that, and if I ever figure it out, I'll certainly let everyone know.